I think we'll just get started. So, Nero, I'm so excited that you are here. Nero Feliciano is a psychotherapist. She is a coach. She is a podcaster. You're a new author, right? You've got, this is your second book. So she's expert. First book. So everyone go out and get it. But we're excited to have Nero here because this is something, as we think through wealth being more than money and what does it mean to be wealthy, obviously mental health is a big piece of it. And I personally find myself, maybe as I'm getting older, it's like worse and worse each year, getting through January, and then February is like, wait, we're still involved in all of this. So I've coped by binge watching Below Deck, but I think there's probably better and more positive coping mechanisms, although that's not a bad one. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Nero, to give us some better ideas than mine. And just a quick reminder to everybody, please if you have any questions, enter questions into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we will go through them and address them at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to pop off screen, Nero, and it's all you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And Below Deck is a perfectly valid coping skill for this time of year. And we're going to talk about the things that bring us joy and pleasure. And we certainly have to schedule time for it. So as I told you before, I think that is a good one. Well, I'm happy to be here. And it feels a little odd to say that I'm happy to talk about winter blues, but that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to share my screen. And also, just to give you a little bit more of a background on myself, I have been a cognitive psychotherapist and anxiety specialist for the last 17 years. I'm also a mom of 4 kids, 2 teenagers, 1 middle schooler, and an elementary schooler, which is a lot of fun during the winter, especially trying to get them out of their winter blues as well, cooped up inside. And also been married for 20 years. So my field of expertise professionally is anxiety and relationships and parenting. So today we're going to talk about beating the winter blues. And I can't ask you because I don't see you right now, but I'm curious to know how many people themselves struggle with this. We might notice a mood change this time of year. I know I certainly do. And many of us, I heard in Chicago, you haven't seen the sun in a while. You can feel that after a few days for sure. And one of the distinctions that I often talk to clients about is what is really the difference between winter blues, seasonal affective disorder, which is an actual depression, and then something called burnout, which we're seeing more and more in the workplace. We saw it around parenting during the pandemic. It's really important to know the difference between these things. So I want to talk to you about that first. So one thing we know with seasonal affective disorder, it is more global. So it affects all different areas of your life. And it really is the same as a regular depression, but it's triggered seasonally. Oftentimes I get calls from clients who I haven't heard from all year. They're so happy during the summer. But as soon as the leaves start falling here in New England and it starts getting darker early, people start feeling this seasonal come on. And one of the big characteristics of depression versus blues or burnout is this overwhelming sense of hopelessness. You may feel worthless. And something called anhedonia, that's a diagnostic characteristic. It's the loss of joy, the things that you normally enjoy doing, you don't feel motivated to do. Irritability, there might be the change in eating or sleeping patterns. You can lose concentration and focus. And in the more severe cases, thoughts of death or suicide. If that is the issue, it's really important to seek some treatment sooner than later. Talk to a therapist. They might refer you to a psychiatrist. You can even start with your primary care doctor because that's going to require a more intensive treatment than just blues or burnout. Now, blues, as I said, it's a mood shift. When the seasons change, you might feel more tired, more lethargic. We do also note that people tend to eat more carbs during that time. It's comfort food, no judgment, but generally unhappier, not as motivated, but you're still able to enjoy parts of life. So you are motivated to watch Below Deck and you still derive enjoyment from that. That might be more of a winter blues type of thing. We're going to talk about how to treat that. Now, burnout is another interesting phenomenon because it has some similar symptoms, lower energy, you might feel exhausted, but it's typically around one area of your life that is creating the burnout. And oftentimes we see that in the workplace. There's a sense of cynicism, sarcasticness about your job, a disconnect from it, and certainly reduced productivity and measurable outcomes. We don't see them as much. There's also just a feeling of overwhelm in that area. Now, the thing about burnout is if we step away from the area that is causing it, we tend to feel better. So a break will make a difference, whereas with depression may not make such a difference. With blues, winter blues, certainly a break. Megan and I talked about going to Florida and staying at the beach for a little while. That will absolutely make a difference, as well as some of the other things that we're going to talk about. It is actually pretty common, winter blues. We know 20% of Americans experience it. I really think it's more than that, but it fluctuates. It comes on and off, and there's certainly things that we can do about it. Now, something to note is that with seasonal affective disorder and with winter blues, there's a couple things going on. One, we're not getting sunlight, and sunlight is a huge source of our production of vitamin D. So in my opinion, most people who live in wintry climates do need a vitamin D supplement. It's something to talk to your provider about just to make sure that it is safe for you. But generally, we run low vitamin D levels. And vitamin D is a precursor for serotonin, that mood elevating neurohormone that we often hear about when we're talking about happiness and joy. That's serotonin. And serotonin is a precursor for making melatonin. Many of you have heard of melatonin when you can't sleep. So the three of those things go together. And when we reduce the sunlight, when our circadian rhythms are off, we may notice that our sleep patterns change, our level of happiness changes. So some of our treatments for these things are going to be centered around getting more sunlight and doing things that increase our serotonin. And it's actually easier than it might seem. In fact, even just talking with someone about it can make a difference, that connection. Oftentimes, I have clients who are fine during the year, and they have issues they're dealing with, whether it's relationships or parenting, or maybe some questions about their purpose or their purpose at work. But it is in the winter where it becomes a little bit more overwhelming. And part of that is we lose some of our coping abilities. You know, it's not as easy to get together with people. It's not as easy to go out in the winter. We lose some of that, and then some of the issues come to the surface. And this one client came to me because come winter, end of fall, these symptoms started affecting her sleep and her ability to eat. She wasn't eating so much. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about her in just a bit. But one thing we know is if you're feeling blue, something has to change. And there's certain things we can do that can make a difference. And what's interesting is, and I love this series that you're doing, because wealth is so much more than our financial status or our success. In fact, there was an article just last week in the Harvard Business Review that talked about success is not a direct measure of life satisfaction. And they actually talked about contentment, which is a huge for me, because that's what I wrote my book on, is finding contentment. And what they talked about is you can be as successful as you want, but if you don't know how to find contentment in your life, you will not feel satisfied. Now, the interesting thing about the book I wrote is I talked about 8 practices that help you find that contentment. But what the research shows us is all of those practices increase our longevity in life because they lower stress. They also increase the production of these mood elevating neurochemicals like serotonin, like dopamine. So these are things that I'm going to talk to you about in changing around some of our habits, incorporating some things into our life that are going to help our mood. There's an interesting article. I'm going to change the slide on Finland. I don't know if any of you read the Huffington Post, but when I was doing the research for my book, something interesting stood out to me. And you may have heard of this, but the Nordic countries rank unusually high on the World Happiness Report every single year. And when I think of the Nordic countries, this article talked about Finland, but I actually wrote about Norway. Long winters, cold winters, But yet these people are some of the happiest people in the world. What is going on here? And one of the things the Huffington Post article talked about was that these people don't necessarily focus on pursuing happiness because they know how to feel content. And what they do is actually very accessible to all of us. And I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So one of the things, like I said, because we're talking about winter blues and it is related to climate and sunlight, some of our solutions involve exercise. One thing we know after being a therapist for 17 years, I can tell you, yes, there are people who need medication. Medication can work under the right circumstances. But one thing we know is that it doesn't help everybody. Exercise, we have research to show does. It is mood elevating. And if you can find a type of exercise that you like, 20 to 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week, it will make a difference in your mood. I have clients who've never exercised when they've come into treatment. We found ways to get them connected slowly, and they literally become addicted in a very positive way to it because of the endorphins, the mood elevating benefits with exercise. What I decided to do this year, because time is limited and what we know about well-being, our longest study in well-being is a Harvard grant study, shows that connected relationships is at the heart of our wellness, of our contentment, of our happiness. So I decided to combine the two. And one of my intentions for this year, because I don't really set resolutions anymore, is to walk with a friend every week, once or twice a week. So different friends, I will take 3 to 4 mile walk with them. And that gets in both exercise as well as strengthening connection. It is a great way to improve your mood. I always feel better after these walks. And pick your friends wisely who you decide to walk with. Make sure they're not people who drain you, but people who you enjoy being with, where there is a give and take type of relationship, and you also feel supported by them. Sunlight exposure is huge for winter blues. So on a day where there is sun, that would be a great day where you can get outside. Ideally, it would be in the morning for 20 to 30 minutes. If it's warm enough to expose some of your skin, that makes a difference. That begins our vitamin D production, which, as I said, leads to serotonin production and melatonin. So we notice mood goes up, sleep gets better. And Megan and I talked about light therapy too. You might have heard of the sad lamps, they're called, but they're actually not sad. They're going to make you happy. They're to deal with seasonal affective disorder. You can buy them on Amazon. 10,000 BTU is what you want to look for. And pretty much about an hour a day, you can sit in front of them, read in front of them. But any place where your room is brighter will affect your mood. We have research to show that. And walking can be with a group, it can be on your own, just taking in your surroundings. But being out in the open air, we do know will shift the trajectory of your mood, especially if you're moving in a negative direction. So I'm going to go to the next screen. Sleep. One of the things we know, because those circadian rhythms are off when we're experiencing winter blues, is we might not sleep well. The other thing we know, I can tell you as a perimenopausal woman, it doesn't matter what season it is, I have trouble sleeping, and many women my age do as well. These are some general suggestions to get your sleep back on track, because it is a huge piece of having a stable mood, and especially in our wellness and happiness. So one, you want to have a set bedtime and wake up time every day, because our body needs to reset that circadian rhythm, and having a routine starts to send the signal to your brain that it is time to go to sleep. I recently did a very interesting interview on my podcast with a sleep expert named Devin Burke. He was fantastic, very practical suggestions, and I really just grilled him for myself, even though it was under the guise of bringing this information to everybody else. But he suggested something called the 3-2-1 rule when we're trying to regulate sleep. And what he said was, you stop eating 3 hours before bed or drinking alcohol. You stop working 2 hours before bed. So computer work off, it's time to wind down at that point. And then get off screens an hour before bed. There's also the 0, which means to hit no snooze hitting. So 0 times you hit snooze in the morning, which I have adopted that, but somehow also learned to sleep 30 minutes past my alarm just automatically. So your brain adapts to what you need. but it is a really great process to improving your sleep. And since I've adapted that, it certainly has gotten better. The other thing is if you're having trouble sleeping, read before you go to bed, opposed to screens. One, we know the benefit of reading. There is a correlation between reading and mood. And the other thing to do is journal. And we're going to talk about one type of journaling in just a minute. But for those of you who are stressed, to circulate your list, your to-do list for the next day, doing what we call a brain dump right before you go to bed, taking a notepad, writing down all the things that are on your mind. So when you wake up in the middle of the night, you've already addressed it before you go to bed. It can be a release that frees up some of your mental space to wind down. So that's something you can do shortly before you go to bed as well. So now let's talk about the Nordic countries. So you may have heard the term hygge. It's spelled that way, but this is at the center of their wellness and finding contentment. And I found a really beautiful definition of hygge, and what they called it was the qualities of coziness and comfort that elicit feelings of well-being and contentment. And this is a fixture in their culture. It is so encouraged. And if we look around in our own life, we can begin to incorporate things like this that bring us comfort, that increase our feelings of contentment. And they're quite simple: reading by the fire, having your favorite blanket, cozy socks, a warm drink. I recently got a heated vest. My husband got one for me because I tend to run cold. I wear it in my house. I wear it outside. It has changed the winter game for me. And it's just one of those very simple things that can bring pleasure. And it's amazing how many things there are like that in our life, but we're so busy, we're so occupied that we don't pay attention to them. And one of the things I wrote about in my book is we really only are affected by the things that we pay attention to. So these simple things often go unnoticed because our focus tends to be in other places, and especially consumed, of course, by devices, by phones, by social media. Um, Again, going back to connection being at the center of our well-being, gathering with friends. Now, it's going to take more effort in the winter, but it is well worth the effort. And what I suggest to clients is put something on the calendar every week or every other week where you're getting together, doing something enjoyable with someone who you want to invest in the relationship with. That could be a partner, that could be a friend, it could be a coworker. Game nights, movie nights, find some funny Netflix shows to watch. That you could even do on your alone. And even going out to dinner and meals and sharing in that together. That is a big piece of the Nordic tradition as well. Just sharing meals with people and the conversations that happen around a dinner table. I really try for that. We have 4 kids, busy sports schedules, but we try and gather around the table at least once a week in between schedules. And in the winter, we actually have more opportunity to do that. You can create some winter traditions to look forward to. I have clients all the time start thinking about new things that they want to do that they can do in the winter. I know for me, I've tried to find different soups to make in the winter, and I look forward to doing that. We do some baking in the winter together. I do with my kids, and I look forward to that tradition. But, we have to just stop and think, what sort of things would we enjoy? What brings us joy? How can we translate that to the winter? This is really kind of common wisdom, just not common practice. And unless we're intentional about thinking about this, it seems very simple. But what our research shows, it's incredibly effective to improve our mood. The other things are anybody who skis is happy in the winter. I've seen that over 17 years of experience. My skiing patients have no problem in the winter. I don't know if that's your thing, but I have had different clients start a practice of skiing. They go out, they take lessons. It's actually a wonderful thing to do with families and kids if you're able to do that, because it gets kids off screens. That's our biggest battle in the parenting world. Sledding, ice skating, 2 other things are great as well to do, to take advantage of this winter time and create some new traditions. The other really important thing is self-care. And we hear a lot about self-care. What is it? But anytime you schedule something for yourself, it improves your well-being, and that affects all the relationships around you. I often have women feeling guilty for doing this, or they don't know where to start. But self-care can be as basic as scheduling 15 minutes to read on a cozy couch. It can mean buying some beautiful flowers for yourself or scheduling a massage. Self-care can also be saying no to things that seem overwhelming that you're not motivated to do. That can be self-care as well. I put down smiling on this list because I have a funny story to share with you. I wrote about smiling in my book because we have 42 facial muscles, and we often don't realize that we carry so much stress in our face. And smiling actually releases that tension. It also sends a signal to your brain that there's something to be happy about. And it actually comes from when you do it at a time where you actually don't feel happy, we take it out of a principle called opposite action in dialectical behavioral therapy. Basically, we're acting in a way that's opposite to how we feel, and there's something about that action that breaks the tension. So I said I would share a story with you. I've been married for 20 years, and my husband and I recently, because you're always learning in marriage, there's always new things you're learning about your partner. We were talking about why we haven't been connecting when he comes home from work. He has quite a long commute. He's an orthopedic surgeon and former Navy, kind of a serious guy. And I know the commute is exhausting for him. And he comes in the door and he's tired and he kind of sends a signal like, I don't want to talk to anybody. So when we were having a conversation, I brought this up and I said, why don't you make an effort to walk in the door and smile? And he literally walked in the door the next day. He dropped everything. He put up his hands like jazz hands and he was like, hi. It was so out of character and so funny. It just dissipated all the tension that we normally feel in that moment. And it really has improved our connection when he's made that effort to walk in the door. So there's a lot of power in doing that. Try it when you're not feeling great, when you're in the middle of a hard workout, and see the difference it can make. And the other thing that I talk with clients about is planning things to look forward to. That can be immediate, putting things on the calendar, events with friends, like I said, games, movie nights. But a great thing, if you can do, is to start thinking about a vacation that you want to take. Because as I was even planning this was the image that came to my mind. And let me tell you, it made me happier instantly. This is a great time to start thinking about where do you want to go? What do you want to do? When is that possible? Potentially financially planning for that. But when we have something to look forward to, it gives us hope. Looking at these images certainly inspire me to start planning. And that is something, if that is something that you're able to do, it's great. And for many of my clients who have seasonal affective disorder and who have the means to go away in the winter, it really is huge to boost their mood, increase their happiness, and give them the resolve and the energy they need to go back into the winter and deal with the rest of it in a more positive frame of mind. So there really is so much truth to sun, sand, water. We know people who live by water are, I think it's like 40% happier. There was a study. If that is something that you can do, that's great. Now, the one thing that I'm very big on that you'll see anywhere I'm speaking is gratitude. And like I said, because generally our serotonin levels are lower, our dopamine levels are lower when we are experiencing winter blues. Gratitude is a very easy, quick way to begin to increase those if we can do it consistently. I actually was just on the Today Show a week and a half ago, and I was talking about gratitude. And as we were talking about gratitude journals, Al Roker said to me, he does his right before he goes to sleep. And I didn't tell him them because I have 4.5 minutes to say a lot of things. But we do have research to say if this is something you do right before bed, then it does improve your sleep. We have research to say people sleep better, deeper, and longer when they have a gratitude practice right before bed. The interesting thing about gratitude is that when you express gratitude to someone, whether it's through a text or a card or a conversation, we release dopamine. Dopamine is our reward chemical. We often see it in addiction. This is a great thing to get addicted to. Elevated mood. It gives you that high feeling. It's often has to do with new pleasure, not things that we've become accustomed to. And I'll tell you how to do that when it comes to gratitude. It increases our motivation. And oftentimes it is that feeling, that reward that we feel when something good happens. And when we write down gratitude in a journal, we release serotonin. And again, mood elevator, but it also helps us with learning and memory. So as we age, even this is a practice that can help us preserve our memory, keep us cognitively sharp. What I get from my clients is, how do you prevent yourself from writing about the same things every day? My partner, my health, my house. And one thing I say is, think about specifics in that day. So what was it that your partner did or said that made you feel happy? Was it their smile? Was it a compliment that they gave you? Was it a text that they sent you, or just the time that you spent together watching a movie? Write down the specifics, and that also will be connected to dopamine because it's something new and it prevents us from writing about the same things every day. And some of the research around gratitude journals, it's really powerful. There's research that shows cardiac patients who experienced heart failure 8 weeks after the event showed lower signs of inflammation if they kept gratitude journals. The ones who did not show the same lower levels of inflammation. We also have research to show that people become healthier when they keep gratitude journals, meaning less cough, cold, even back pain. They showed some correlation with that. And anytime you have a practice that lowers stress, we lower inflammation and chronic inflammation. That's why these practices long-term do actually result in longevity. And the book I wrote is filled with different practices that you can incorporate fairly quickly, because I wrote it saying, if a busy person like me can do it, then it is doable. And I know so many of you are so busy. Everybody's busy these days. I don't know anybody who has extra time, no matter what you do. So we need something that can be quick. And one thing about habit formation, making something like this a habit, is it's really helpful to stack it with something that we already do. So maybe this becomes part of your bedtime routine. This takes, by the way, like 2 to 3 minutes. And the effects over time are so powerful. It's worth taking the 2 to 3 minutes. I don't know if you've got that from me already. I've said it like 3 times. But another time to do gratitude journal, something that you do every day, making your coffee in the morning. Keep your journal right there while your coffee is making. Just write a couple things down. That is a practice in and of itself. Now, the other thing is, like I said, if your symptoms are exceeding some of these practices, so if you've tried these things, you're still not feeling well, you are experiencing that sense of hopelessness or overwhelm, definitely please seek a therapist. I actually have a referral system in my practice if you cannot find a therapist, especially if you happen to be in the Northeast. But betterhelp.com is a great site to look for a therapist. You can ask your primary care doctor. I've even had people go on their town website asking for a therapist who's good. And people shout out their therapist. I always say, like, a 5-star Yelp review for Chinese takeout. It's just amazing to me when I see that, because we're talking more freely about mental health, which is wonderful. Psychology Today also has a great site for finding a therapist in your area. There's a find a therapist tool. You can read their profiles. It'll tell you if they're accepting patients or not. So that's a great place to go. Medication, as I said before, it can be really helpful. Medication does not have to be long-term. I do have clients who've gone on medication seasonally and they come off in the spring. But it can be really helpful at a time in your life to give you the motivation to then do the work that we just talked about. And the other thing that I wanted to just quickly mention, Megan and I talked about, is I have also created a coaching program. I actually stopped taking new patients in 2019 and began to think about other things. That's when I wrote my book. And I have put together a coaching program. And the difference between coaching and therapy is coaching is very action oriented. It is a process to kind of have the accountability to move forward and get to your goals. And it is something that I've seen in terms of the difference between the both. I have been seeing results when you are goal focused in that way, in a different way in coaching. And I'm happy to tell you more about that if it's something that you're interested in. I created the program that I probably needed myself, because I felt that, my life is so full, but it was also really busy, and I wasn't getting the sense of fulfillment and satisfaction that I wanted in my life. And by doing the things that I did, I was able to find out how to get there. And now I have a program to help other people experience the same. So if that's something you're interested in, please feel free to contact me. And these are the places that you can find me. So that little QR code goes right to my website. I write a newsletter every 2 weeks. I have a lot of resources that I offer people and just stories that inspire people to live intentionally that I like to share. I don't send you much junk mail just because I don't have time to write it. You don't have time to read it. If you'd like to book a discovery call with me to see if we would be a good fit to work together, that is my Calendly link for coaching. That is my book. This book won't make you happy because it really is a difference between happiness and our cultural definition of happiness, which often is about how much you have and what you do and how good you are and how we're comparing ourselves to other people. And then the things that we found, especially through the research, that truly bring us to a place of feeling fulfilled and satisfied in life. And that's in contentment. I'm on Instagram all the time. You can connect with me there. I have a blog on Psychology Today called The Good Enough Life, which I haven't written in a while, but I'm starting that up again this month. And then I have a podcast as well called All Things Life. So that's all for me. And I am happy to answer questions. They don't have to be about winter blues. They can really be about anything. You have free reign with this therapist right now. So certainly I'm happy to take your questions.
Thanks, Nero. Yeah, if anyone has any questions to pop into the Q&A, we'll give it a minute. I don't do any of that stuff that you said. I have to do it all. I totally need to do it all. I know I feel like what you were saying with the gratitude journal, like I did keep feeling like I was just saying the same kind of thing, but
Yes.
so you got to kind of be a little bit more intentional about it. I like the idea of walking. We have a dog that if we don't walk her, then she just jumps up all over our faces. So I have been taking her out walking, and that it makes a difference. And I'm such a dork. I've been listening to a podcast about Below Deck as I walk, and I'll be just walking and laughing. But like, you know what? If that's what it takes,
Yes.
that's what it takes. So
It is. And what I would say is there's so much content and information there on wellness. Start with one thing and get consistent with one thing until it actually makes a difference before you take on something else. You don't have to do all of this to experience the benefits of it. Starting with one is a great place.
Well, I don't know that anybody has any questions. So I think we will, with that, say thank you so very much for spending some time with us, and really, really appreciate it. And I definitely would encourage everyone to seek out Nero's, all of the resources that we've provided here and that she's provided. So thanks to all, and go and enjoy the rest of your February 7th.
And thank
Thanks
you for
all.
having me. Pleasure to be here.
Bye-bye.